Hey guys, it's Lion here with HobbiesofaMan once again, and today we're going to be doing another comic book issue review. We're going to be looking at Thundercats number 4, which apparently finishes off the first arc. Now, to be honest with you, I don't feel like there's been much of an arc. Like, the story has advanced a bit, but mostly what's happened is just a bunch of building of characters, right? So, like, narratively, the positioning of the characters has changed emotionally, but there hasn't really been enough action to really warrant calling this the end of an arc, right? Like, the plot line hasn't really transitioned enough, in my opinion. But at the same time, I think that what I understand this to be is more like a prologue, right? Like, this is the beginning of the story, and so all of this stuff is set up, and you need to know this, but it's important that you focus mostly on how these characters got to be where they are. Then you care about this, like, narrative structure, this plot line that's happening overall, right? And so by the end of this, everyone is set up to basically start the adventure here on Third Earth, right? To really have the Thundercats have a base and a lair where they can live and exist, and for them to have like a base of operations against the mutants and the and Mumra, right? So I understand that kind of idea. Like, if this is the prologue, then this functions as an arc, but as an arc itself, I'm not really sure that that's the case. Also, 4 issues is a small amount. Are they going to charge, $20 for this issue or for this trade? Because I think that's what Dynamite usually charges, right? But 4 issues is not really a standard amount of issues in a trade, right? They're usually supposed to be 6. So I would not pay that if I had to buy it, unless it was discounted, right? So I don't know, but I did like each of these issues individually. So yeah, that's the end of the first arc here. But this issue opens with Wily Cat and Panthro working together on this. I'm not really sure what it is. I think it's part of the ship. And they're basically just going through the motions in order to try to get Panthro to explain to Wily Cat that, we have to find a way to come back to save our ship, to do something about this, to make our position stronger. And it's basically just a way to kind of highlight what the ending is going to be, right? Like, Panthro is preparing to fix the ship to leave, where Lion at the end of the story is going to ask them to stay, right? So that's kind of what this is about. Then it transitions over to Lion, who's talking with Tigra, and they're talking about romance, right? And Tigra in this case is this wise older gentleman, right? Like, he has this cool, like, 90s mustache. It's like early or maybe like 1990s. I don't know. He has this like cool old-timey mustache, right? And he has this like suave gentleman vibe to him that I really like. And so he's trying to tell Lion about, the matters of the heart, right? Like, the problems of the heart don't go away, but they get better over time, and you're gonna have to struggle with this, and you're gonna have to figure out, how you feel and all of that stuff, right? And after they do this, Tigra sees something in the distance, and we don't know what it is at the time, but it turns out to be, a bunch of dangerous mummies, right? So cool. Then we transition over to Calico, who goes to Panthro to talk to him about something. Mostly, I think, to apologize because of the Thunder challenge that happened last time, or the Thunder duel. I can't remember what it's called. When Panthro and Chitara fought. And she tries to talk to him about it, and then Panthro is called away. He hears Lionel's call, and so he's like, Calico, you're not really a Thundercat. You're not really a fighter. Stay here. I have to go away, right? And this is bad because Calico is not really trustworthy, right? So she stays in this area, and Panthro goes away. Then we get to see Slythe talking with the Monkians, right? And they become allies, right? So now these 2 mutant characters are together. They form some alliance together, and it's going to be worse for our characters. If I remember correctly, in the original series, these guys were henchmen to Mumra, right? So we haven't really gotten to that point yet. I'm curious to see what's going to happen, and if that ever happens in this version of the story, right? So yeah, then we transition over to the first battle scene here, where we get this awesome shot of the Thundercats on this outcropping, kind of like this hill, I guess, where they stand and they start their battle, and they start fighting against the reptilian mummies or zombies or whatever they're supposed to be. And Lion-O calls out Thundercats strike, which is really awesome. I really like that call. And it's a really awesome battle overall. While this is happening, the narrator also talks about the Thundercats, right? He says a bunch of stuff about them, mostly extolling their virtues and why they're there and kind of their background, giving you a little bit of information about each of them, right? And from my understanding, this narrator is a future version of Lion-O, right? At least that's what it seems like. But I could be wrong, right? So if you guys know, let me know down in the comments. But overall, this scene here and the battle that continues on from there is pretty great. So I really like it. Then Tigra tries to step up to Mumra, who's, controlling these mummy things. And he gets Palpatined, Mumra unleashes this this lightning power against Tigra, and he basically cooks him. He doesn't die, but he gets cooked. And Mumra wants the eye, right? Like the eye of Thundera. Now, a lot of scenes here happen to look very Star Wars. And as a fan of Star Wars, I love it. As a reader, I'm a bit like iffy on them in the sense that there could be a little bit more originality to them. Like some of these scenes look like very, very similar to stuff from the original trilogy, right? Like, and also to stuff that happens in the Chancellor's room, right? At the end of the third movie of Star Wars, right? The Revenge of the Sith. Like, it's not a problem. I like it. I think it's cool. But at the same time, I'm like, well, maybe you could have done something slightly different, right? So your mileage may vary there. I liked it, but I have a little bit of a issue with it. You might have a lot of an issue with it, or you might not care at all. You might be like, well, I mean, they're very similar stories. Who cares if they ape off each other, right? It really depends. Ultimately, I don't really care too much. I think it looks cool. So, yeah. Then Lion-O has this look at the cave moment where he kind of stares at Mumra, and Mumra tells him something. And Lion-O's like, I'd rather not be like you. I don't want this evil power, nor do I want to be your henchman, right? So it's not really look at the cave, it's more like look at the throne room, right? So, yeah, overall, pretty badass fight here with Mumra at the end. Then we get the transition over to the base again, where we get to see that Snarf gets angry about something, but we don't know what. We don't get to see what he's seeing. And then we transition back to see that Lion-O is actually losing his exchange with Mumra now, even though initially he was winning. And mostly because Mumra is using psychological attacks against Lion-O. He's telling him that, those that love him are going to betray him. He's telling him that Panthro has abandoned him, right? And Lion-O feels like he's kind of believing this, right, to an extent because of the difficulties that he's had so far, right? But ultimately, Panthro shows up in their Thunder Tank, and there's a really badass moment here where Panthro yells. He's like, dude, jump. I can't remember what he says. He says like Thunder Leap or something. Lion-O does, and then he gets caught by Panthro, and then they get into the Thunder Tank, and then they decide to escape, right? They move away, they live to fight another day, and Mumra basically loses this exchange. Then they get back home. We get to see that Snarf has been hurt. Calico apparently is gone, and Panthro and Lion-O make up about, their differences that they've had. Lion-O accepts that he was wrong, they trust Calico, that he was manipulated by his puppy love, and that Panthro was ultimately right. And Panthro is like, well, yes, but also I was kind of not doing my job properly. I was being too forceful. You're a man grown now. You should make your own choices. I should abide by them, that sort of stuff. And ultimately, I get that it works, and I get that this is a really meaningful moment, but Lion-O doesn't deserve it because Panthro was completely right. Lion-O was completely taken by Calico. He was completely seduced and clearly lost the exchange against her, right? And although Panthro was forceful, there really is no point in apologizing because he was right. Like, Panthro maybe, you can argue that Panthro should have been more respectful, but Lion-O is not really a man. He's still a child. He just has the body of a man, right? So Panthro is still right to chastise him and get angry with him when Lion-O doesn't listen, because Lion-O is taking advantage of a situation that is not actually the way it is, right? Like, if Lionel had the 10 years that he missed of trading, right, then maybe the argument would be different, right? Like, maybe Lionel would deserve that respect, but Lionel doesn't really deserve the respect because he hasn't earned it. He hasn't done anything to deserve it, right? But I don't know. I really like this either way. I think it's an interesting storyline, but I feel like it happened a bit too quickly. I would have been much more satisfied than I already am if it had been a little bit more of a slow process, or if Panthro was less forthcoming with his apologies, right? And then basically Lionel decides that Third Earth is now their home. They had to prepare a lair to protect, and they have to battle against Mumra and the mutants if they want to carve out an existence on this place, right? And this is the end of the arc, and in the sands, we get to see this book or this journal that has the Thundercat emblem on it, a jewel on it, and that seems to be important because Mumra is talking to Jaga, I think, as we get to see this, right? And pretty good stuff. I mean, I liked this book. I really had a good time with it. I think that all the battle scenes were great. I do have some issues with how the storyline kind of happens in terms of the character development and the kind of conversations that the characters have. But ultimately, this first arc is more or less like a 9 out of 10, right? Besides my issues with the fact that this arc feels too short and it's not really a story arc, it's more like a prologue, and the fact that I think Panthro really didn't have to apologize, it's ultimately not enough of a problem for me to stop reading this. Like, I will continue to read Thundercats. The only kind of thing that I might want to change out of this series is maybe I would like a different artist. Not because Drew Moss is bad, but I just don't think his art style is my favorite. Like, I don't dislike it, but I also might like some other style better. At the same time, though, I'm not really sure that there's anyone in the Western comic book sphere that could really capture what I want out of the Thundercats, right? Like, they're not going to look like the originals. They're not going to look like the animated edition. And I don't necessarily want them to really look like furries either, right? Like, I wouldn't necessarily want a furry artist or like a mangaka that does more like animal style kind of stuff. Like, I don't necessarily want this to look like Beastars, but I feel like a different style of art might make this even better for me, right? So it is what it is. It's not really a problem. I still like what's going on. I just might like it better otherwise, right? So yeah, those are my thoughts on Thundercats here. What do you guys think about this issue? Let me know down below, and thank you guys so much for watching, and see you guys later.